she ends up revealing that, I was with him before you and I'm going to be with him after you. It's always going to be me. So this episode opens with a flashback of Karen and Parker. And he's giving her a tattoo. And he's telling her how he's going to give her a question mark tattoo.
You're going to be a question mark.
And so we flash to the present. Emma is going over these photos of the bodies that were recovered, and she's looking at the tattoos because she's saying that there's something here that connects each of these victims.
Emma, we've already looked at these photos. There's nothing in them.
No, everything had meaning for him. Everything.
And after looking at the designs, she could clearly see that there in all of his designs, there's some variation of a question mark. And she said that he once told her that he would give question mark tattoos only to people that he could truly be himself around or truly reveal himself to.
He said her question mark was for people he would show his true self to.
And she started... he saw that she was looking concerned. This is Pete. Saw that Emma was, I don't know, upset, afraid. She looked scared or something. I don't know. And he asked her, like, well, so what are you thinking about? And so she ended up telling him that in all of her memories, flashbacks of her walking into this place and seeing this woman on the ground, it's always her holding the weapon, holding the hammer. And he's, still telling her that, he doesn't believe that she killed anyone. And he pointed out the tattoo that she has. So if you remember when, in the beginning, she had that heart tattoo that says Kit and Karen. And he was saying how, you remember this tattoo and how we carefully, constructed this tattoo because she got a tattoo to cover the old tattoo. And he was telling her that your tattoo was supposed to be a question mark. And so she kind of shook her head no. Like, he's basically saying that you initially was going to be one of his victims. And he said that, so your tattoo was supposed to be a question mark, but the needle slipped.
It was meant to be a question mark, but the needle slipped.
And so he, she looked at him and was like, no, he loved me. He said, no, he fell in love with you. And that's the only reason you're still alive.
He loved me.
No. He fell in love with you.
So Emma she makes it home and Jay's there. And he's, told her that he had found a box of syringes that looked very similar to the syringe that the cleaner at the hotel injected herself with. And so he found a box of those syringes in Jess's things, and he found a syringe in Tina's one of her coat pockets or something.
And then I found this in Tina's jacket.
And they talked a bit, and he was saying, is that why they went to go see? Is that why they're with Jesus now? Because they did drugs. And so, eventually they talked a little bit and she ended up, just telling him to go home. So Mary and Jake, they're back at the office and Jake is asking her, basically saying, have you seen this? And it was a composite of that a woman gave the police of her assailant. It was a woman that was raped in Missouri. And he was like, wait a minute, this looks like the creep that came in interviewing for a job. And he, showed like the surveillance cameras and show the comparison. Like, looks exactly like this guy. You can kind of see her face, Mary's face, like, oh, okay. Like, you didn't know he was a monster, girl.
I think it's him. The creep who wanted to work with us.
Anywho. So, it had to happen. Lisa took a trip to the cabin. And they talked for a bit. And she was explaining to her that he, had just only put me here until they find someplace else for me to go. And she was like, yeah, the very cabin that he told me he sold and that I would never have to see or step foot in again.
in a house he told me he sold in a place he said we'd never come back to.
And then she just pulled out her extra. Are you sleeping with my husband? And she, Emma said, no, it's not like that. She's like, I didn't choose Pete. She's like, but he chose you. And she ends up telling her, if you want my advice, get out while you still can. And she kind of looked at the cabin like it was like this awful place to be. And I can imagine she has some terrible memories there. And so as she turned to get in her car, Emma said, he told me about, you know, what happened about you being at the group home and you staying here for a time period. And she's, you know, basically saying that she needs her help and that 2 girls from the home has already been murdered. And so they talked for a bit and she ends up showing her the syringes. And you could tell by her reaction that she knew exactly what they were.
They were injecting themselves with this. What are they doing?
And Emma, you know, was trying to get her to open up and saying that, you know, she wants to be able to, I guess, find justice for these girls or do something right. And so Lisa basically said to her, girl, how are you going to help somebody? You can't even help yourself. Why would I confide in you? And she walked out, got in her car, and went on wherever.
Put my trust in you? You can't even save yourself. How are you going to save anyone else?
So later that day, Mary ends up calling John, I guess, to figure out, she ended up asking him, like, what have you been up to? She didn't come out and accuse him. And so he's saying, are you projecting? Is there something that you've done that you feel guilty about? And before she can even respond, he tells her that he found Karen.
I found her.
And her whole demeanor changed. And he basically told her that, you know, to stop worrying about everything and don't ruin a good thing. And it's just a sicko. And how, you know, she's down there and she has a job and a boyfriend and they go out dancing and she's not, you know, the least bit concerned. So he's like rubbing it in like this is like some affront to Mary personally, like her daughter is dead and she's suffering. And he's trying to paint this picture of Karen, aka Emma, like living their life like it's golden down in Louisiana. He didn't specify where she was. He just said down here. And he eventually hung up. So Lisa didn't get very far. You see her, she's parked on the side of the road and she's having a flashback. And it was of her when she was younger. And she was still at St. Jerome's, at Jerome's house. And she was in some hospital, some medical room. And Bowden, Rose's dad, was saying how she's doing the Lord's work and how they're going to be blessed for their contribution, something to that effect.
What you've done is an act for Jesus.
And so she eventually called Emma and told her what the situation was. And basically told him that there's a room in the attic of Jerome house that they have set up like a hospital room. And that they have been stealing their eggs.
It was our eggs. They took our eggs.
So I'm assuming those shots are like hormone shots, so they produce more eggs each month or something. That's what I'm assuming they are. So, and Bowden has been the person doing these procedures. But when Emma asked, okay, so who's responsible for this? Lisa said, I can't believe you've been here all these weeks and you have no idea who runs this town.
You've been there all these weeks and you still don't know who runs that town.
She didn't say Bowden, but we know it's Bowden from the flashback that Lisa had. And so what she didn't know was that in the distance you saw Rose. Rose finally made an appearance because we haven't seen her in a while. And she was looking at her from afar. So later that night, Emma went to Jerome's house and she made her way to the attic and she can clearly see it, the way it's set up. It's set up like a hospital room. It looks dirty and unsanitary. And, you know, she saw the beds with the stirrups and the restraints and... Lisa did mention that, you know, there's a wall that had all the girls' names on. I guess they carved their names into the wall, and, you know, she did find the wall with, I don't know how many names on that wall. She did find Lisa's name, and it said Lisa 2004. And then she heard a noise, so she hid, and then she realized it was Rose. Rose had been following her. And Rose ends up saying something about the cop. Like, I see that the cop left, and I'm glad that he's gone. You shouldn't have been with him anyway. And
the dumb cop. And I'm glad. You shouldn't be with him.
Then she told Emma how she felt, about how she's in love with her, and she ends up kissing her, and Emma ends up having to tell her that I do care about you, but only as a friend. You know that I'm your friend, but I just don't care about you that way. And she was of course she was disappointed. And she said, I need to tell you something about your dad. And so her whole demeanor changed real quick from being somber and like heartbroken to, okay, why are you asking me about my dad? And so she's trying to tell her about her father and, you know, what's been going on and what he's responsible for. And she was not trying to hear it. And she kept saying that people kept saying that you were the dark, you know, she kept saying you were the monster and the darkness that's in town. None of this stuff happened until you came to town, which of course isn't true. It's been happening for years, but she just doesn't know that.
What are you talking about my dad for? What's wrong with you?
He's involved in something.
No.
And she eventually left her in the attic. So she got home and she took photos of the attic while she was there, and she sent them to Tom. Now, keep in mind, she hasn't been able to get in contact with Tom for a minute. So she sent him the photos and the text, and then she tried to call him, and it went to voicemail. And she was saying in the voicemail that she, you know, finally realizing what happened at St. Jerome's and how her memory is starting to come back to her. And there's another flashback, and it's a flashback of her that night. She was wearing the clothes that you saw in the woods where she went into labor. She went home, and she saw like some stuff just sprawled across the floor, a shoes, a purse, somebody's cell phone. And as she walked closer to the bathroom, that's when she saw the bloody hammer. And so she picked the hammer up. So this is why every time she has these flashbacks, she see herself holding the hammer, but because she did actually pick the hammer up, but she didn't use it. The woman was already fatally injured by the time she got there. And so when she turned around, that's when she saw, I'm assuming that was Amy Walker, on the ground. She was barely clinging on to life. And then she saw Kit. He's coming to her covered in blood. And out of nowhere, Teresa comes out and saying, you know, you need to help me and we need to leave. And
Help me.
she ends up taking the hammer from Emma, and she ends up hitting Kit with it, knocking him down. And she grabs Emma, and they run out of the apartment. And then you see Kit runs up to the door, and he's banging on the door.
I'll kill you!
Which makes the flashback that Emma had make sense now. Because if you remember, when Jess went to the house, that night Jess went to the house and was banging on the door for her to let her in, and she needed to help her and protect her, she had a flashback of Kit banging on the door. And I thought that like he was locked in the attic or somewhere. I didn't know. But now it makes sense. They had run out of the apartment, and he's banging on the door saying that he's going to kill them. So we go to the hotel, and John, who we know has Tom's phone, he is texting. He's been communicating back and forth with Emma, and he set up a date for that night to meet at the local bar. And he made sure to put in the text that John will be joining us.
Have a few drinks, me and her. Oh God, I really shouldn't drink.
And so he made a cup of coffee for Tom, and for whatever reason decided to spit in it. I can't imagine. So I'm thinking to myself, if I was Tom, I wouldn't eat or drink his shit he gave me. But anywho, so he still got him tied up in the taped up in the bathroom, in the bathtub. So as he walked into the bathroom, there was Tom received a notification, and John's car is an all points bulletin for his car. So in the next scene, John is ditching the car. He drove it into the lake. And so as it was sinking, he called Mary and basically told Mary that you burned me and now I'm going to burn you. And
John.
You burned me, Mary, and now I am going to burn you.
Mary is going back and forth with him, talking about how he's a monster and how he's guilty and how she's going to hunt him down too. And
you know what? Screw you to hell. I know you raped her and I will hunt you down too.
Of course, he laughed in her face like, you can't even find your daughter. And basically he's saying that day or night, I'm coming to get you. Basically watch your back.
Find you one night, one day.
Watch your back.
So we go to the bar and Emma and John is there and he's talking to Emma, basically relaying messages from Tom about how Tom is upset with her and how he doesn't trust her, and basically he's just talking crap about Tom. And for some odd reason, you know, she is buying into it. I guess after their last interaction when he talked to her about, when she told him about what was going on, I mean, it's not that far off. And so she stepped outside and she called Tom and left a message basically saying that if he has all these feelings, you know, towards her, how he doesn't trust her and all this other nonsense, that he should have the balls to say it to her face. So she went back in and she continued to play pool with John. And they was about to say their good night, and she decided to stay later and continue drinking. And they made some bet that the loser, you would go, whoever loses, we would go to their house, but the winner picks the music. And so, of course, she lost because he was conning her. He pretended like he didn't know how to play until they made the bet, and then of course he ended up winning the game. So he's now at her house. She's drunk off her ass, dancing around with this man she barely know. And he ended up seeing this chair that she painted that had Freya's name on it, and he asked her who's Freya, and so she, you know, basically said that, you know, she needed something to drink, needed some water, so she went into the living room to sit down. And, you know, they started talking about kids and, you know, the reasons why people have kids. And Pete had a point about her not getting involved, you know, talking to people, because she talked too damn much. It's like, if you don't even know him and you crying on this man's shoulder about how you want your daughter and he shouldn't even know that you have a daughter, and this man you barely know shouldn't even be in your house. And it's like, you know, it's like I'm looking at the scene and I'm like, Pete may have had a point about you staying to yourself, because you exercise zero self-control, honey. And so they started talking about regrets and things that, you know, they've done, and he brought up the fact that he's saying that Tom told him that she had hurt somebody, and she ended up asking him about his regrets, and he's like, oh, you know, this is too deep. I need to go to the little boy's room. So he went to the bathroom. So we go to Rose. She's at home and she's feeling some kind of way. So she ends up looking up Karen Miller's information, which of course is attached to Mary Barlow's information. Of course, she finds the organization, and we can only imagine what she did. So while John is in the bathroom, she's texting Tom, and she noticed, you know, all of a sudden she started hearing these, you know, beeps and notifications. She's trying to figure out, like, what is going on. And so she went into the kitchen where John had his briefcase and opened it, and she saw Tom's phone in there. So now she realized that it's been a game, and she has been talking to him the whole time, and she's now trying to figure out, okay, so where the hell is Tom? So he eventually, saw her, caught her. Eventually, we knew that he would. And a fight ensues, and she has now locked herself in the room. While this is going on, we see Rose. A car's pulling up, and Rose is standing outside, and you realize that it's Mary. So Mary's now in Louisiana because Rose reached out to her to say that she knows where Karen is, because she a raggedy bitch. So this would be, that can go for Mary or Rose. She ends up giving her a piece of paper, which I'm assuming has Emma's address on it. So we go back to Emma's house, and she has fought off John. She's locked herself in the room, and now all her memories are starting to flood back. So while he's banging on the door, she's flashing back to when she ran out of the apartment, and Parker was not banging on the door saying how he's going to kill them. And before they even made it out of the hallway, her and Teresa, her water broke. And so now they're in the car, and she's talking about how I need to get to a doctor. And she realized that they were going through the woods, that they weren't going in the right direction. So she ended up saying, this is not, the right way to a doctor.
This isn't the way to the hospital.
And then Teresa started laughing, and she basically told her she wasn't taking her to a doctor.
Oops.
And so this is where you find out that Teresa is actually every bit of a monster as Parker. So Emma ends up jumping out of the car, so that's how she ended up in the woods, running through the woods. And Emma and Teresa was hot on her heels with the hammer. And so she ends up revealing that, I was with him before you, and I'm going to be with him after you. It's always going to be me.
Before it was you and him, it was me and him. And it's always gonna be me and him.
And so she's trying to, run and fight her off as best she can. And, she started talking about how, did you think that you was going to have his child? I was going to let you have a piece of him. And she is basically tormenting this woman, Karen at the time. And so she's now in the snow, and she's fallen down a couple of times. She didn't climb on top of her. This is Teresa. And Teresa ends up asking her, what have you done? And Teresa ends up saying, I did all of it, just like what I'm going to do to you.
I did everything. And I'm going to do it now.
And so Teresa ends up slapping her, and she ends up being able to somehow maneuver from under her. And as she's crawling, she's reaching for this rock. Teresa's reaching for the hammer. And Emma swung around and basically knocked the crap out of her. Basically, I guess he cracked her skull and killed her. And so all of this is going on while in real time, John is on the other side of the door. He broke the door down. He made his way into the room and basically got her pinned up against the wall saying, gotcha.
Gotcha.
So that's how this episode ends. So it turns out that her baby was a goddamn monster and a serial killer, and I guess Emma did the world a favor. Emma, aka Karen, did the world a favor.